quick introduction about me and why I'm here in front of you today. Sandrine sort of talked about it earlier, but my career actually began in tech. I did a undergraduate degree in computer science, did my master's degree in technology management here in the Philippines. Before I decided to make what was either the best or the worst decision of my life, which was to become a journalist. And I ended up becoming a journalist first with the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism, before becoming eventually editor in chief of GMA News Online, which is the largest media organization in the Philippines. I oversaw all web publishing, video publishing, and social media. I did that job for about 9 years before going on a fellowship at Harvard University in 2023. And it was the best time to be on campus because it had only been a few months after the release of ChatGPT. So everyone on campus was talking about AI, but no one on campus was talking about AI, number one, in the context of journalism, and number two, in the context of the Philippines and the broader global south. So, because of my background in both technology and journalism, that sort of fell on my lap, and I began to build tools and write about my journey exploring these tools for newsroom workflows. Since coming back to Manila in 2024, I've been working with media companies, with universities, and media development organizations, including the GIJN, on projects in AI and digital transformation and getting the word out on how newsrooms around the world can take advantage of these tools. But let me first take a step back to my first AI project. This is now nearly 3 years ago. Um, I wanted to build an AI tool to help investigative journalists here in the Philippines find stories in audit reports. So every year, the Philippine government is mandated that there be an audit report produced for every government agency, whether local or national. So we're talking about every ministry or department. We're talking about every local government unit, that is the province, the city, the town, every government-owned corporation. There needs to be an audit report. So we're talking about thousands of audit documents that could be potentially valuable for investigative journalists in the Philippines. They have clues and tips of possible fraud or misuse of funds. But there's no way every document can be read by reporters on that beat because of the sheer volume of audit reports. So I've been even before my Neiman Fellowship in 2023, I've been thinking about figuring out a way where we could use AI to process these audit reports. Before ChatGPT was launched, it would have taken me hundreds of documents and possibly thousands of hours of training to build a model to try to find stories in these audit reports. With ChatGPT, it only took me 2 days to build this tool. And so that underscores the quantum leap of this technology and its potential for use for investigative reporting. But even in those 2 days, it didn't quite come naturally because what I discovered was that ChatGPT was a terrible journalist. I would try that thing when you do a prompt engineering, a beginner's prompt engineering class, where you ask it to play a persona and ask it to do a report. So I would ask the AI, pretend you're an investigative journalist. Here's an audit report. Can you tell me what stories are here in this audit report? And it was giving me a grade school level book report about the document itself, and it wasn't giving me any leads to the story. So I began to wonder if it would have been faster for any reporter to just not use AI and to read the audit report themselves. Until I had my eureka moment, and that was that I was a better journalist than the AI. So why was I asking it to do my job for me? In fact, I've read dozens, if not hundreds, of these audit reports myself, both as a reporter and as an editor. And I knew what I was looking for in the audit reports. I was looking for qualified opinions. I was looking for audit observations. I was looking for disallowances and suspensions. And all I needed to do was to tell AI what it had to look for in these audit reports. And so that began the framework that I started to think about uh, when I would work with AI for any other project. And I hope this is a framework that you keep in mind, which is a lot of it is trying to figure out what you're good at. In this case, I was good at investigative journalism. I had that experience. I had the editorial judgment, and then figuring out what AI is good at. So in this case, it was processing large volumes of text and then generating summaries fast. And putting that together is the key to creating a workflow and a tool that would be immediately useful for newsrooms, whether for investigative journalism or for any other process that you find. Um, what I found too is that your experience as journalists will come in handy in designing these tools for your own workflows. Since then, local news organizations in the Philippines have been using the audit report assistant that I created. And what was interesting is that they weren't using it to write stories. They were using it to find stories. They were using it to triage these audit reports to find or to figure out whether they needed to invest more time into reporting a particular audit report or if they should move on to the next one. But it really helped their process become more efficient because they don't have to read each and every document. And it also made their process uh, more engaging and more widespread because they're able to cover more audit reports even if they might have limited manpower. Now, shortly after I released that tool, Zach Seward, the editorial director of AI at the New York Times, talked about my tool in his presentation in one of his first presentations in 2024. And he cited it among the good uses of AI. And what he noted was my tool, along with other tools he presented, the common element in all our projects is that we weren't really generating something new. We were creating summaries, extracting information, and we were structuring data in a more usable form. Now, this is something I tell my workshops, whether or not they're investigative journalists or they're just day-to-day beat reporters. AI is not a good source of information, but AI is great at helping you find information. So again, I look back at that framework, right? You always think about what you're good at and what AI is good at when you're designing tools and workflows for your own reporting, right? So for example, AI is good at summarization. It is good at creating outlines of out of documents. It's getting better at summarizing other media like videos and podcasts. Some newsrooms are experimenting with using it to create headlines and social media captions instantly. But throughout all these processes, um, they are only generating structured information out of information that they already have. So again, they're only processing information. They're not relying on AI to make anything up or to be the source of information. Um, AI has been getting better too for finding information. So if you're an investigative journalist, You could use it well to find information inside big stacks of documents because you can do natural language queries. So you can type full questions like what did the report say about overspending, and it will find the right parts for you. It's better than Control F if you're working with a Word document or a PDF file, right? It can find synonyms and related terms. So if you look for a term like fraud, it can find something like misuse of funds or irregularities. And that's because it has semantic understanding, which means it can find concepts and not just words. So if you're looking for something related to government spending, the AI can also help you find public funds or budget allocation out of that document. My favorite tool for finding information is Notebook LM by Google. If you haven't used this, you should try using this. It's very, very useful for journalism and investigative journalism. And I think its superpower is that you are able to limit your search only to the documents that you upload. That means it doesn't look for everything in its own knowledge base. It doesn't look for everything on the web unless you tell it to. It will limit its search only to the sources that you indicate. And if you're a good investigative journalist, then you already have access to the documents that you would need to investigate. And AI can help you find the information fast. So here's an example. I uploaded the World Bank report on country climate change and development for the Philippines. And I can ask it a question like, how much did the country commit to reducing greenhouse gas emissions? It's not going to search the web. It's only going to search the report, and it will give me the answer instantly. The great thing about it is there are footnotes that take you directly to the part of the document where it based that answer on. So you can actually fact check your the answers immediately. Here's another example. You can ask it a question like, will climate change cause a famine? Now, what's interesting about this example is there's no mention at all in the document about famine, but it's able to do semantic understanding. And so it's able to give you answers related to hunger and malnutrition, higher food prices, and its impact on agriculture and fisheries. And it's smart enough to figure out that those may be related to famine because famine is related to food security. Food security is related to agriculture and fisheries, and climate change may have impact on those industries. And so that's just a demonstration of how AI can help you find information, even if you don't find the exact description of the needle in the haystack. You just have to be in the same ballpark, and it will help you find that sort of information. You can even use AI to find or to build structure out of related document data sets. So documents are unstructured information, but you can actually use AI to find information from several documents that are that could be tabulated, that could be structured. So here I am asking it to create a table with columns such as committed reduction in GHG emissions, industry that causes the most emissions for each of those countries, and impact of climate change on the GDP. So I'm doing this across all climate and country development reports for countries in Asia Pacific. So that includes Cambodia, China, Indonesia, Laos, several Pacific Island countries, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. It will search all those documents, and it will build me a table containing the columns that I asked for. And again, if you check out the results, there would be footnotes there that would take you to the actual uh, text in the document where you could immediately fact check the information given to you by AI. That for me makes it more trustworthy because you can check immediately. And it really cuts down on the time it takes for you to do research. Now, before we move further, I'd like to talk about data privacy and security. You have to be careful about what documents you upload to which services. So for Notebook LM, they make a point that all your documents that you upload remain private to you. They don't use it for training their data. Other services like ChatGPT, for example, even the plus level of their subscription, which is the $20 a month level, there's no language there that says it will remain private to you. They might be looking at your chats to train their models, and so uh, it's very sensitive. If you have very sensitive material, you don't want to upload that to AI. So always make sure to read the terms of service for each platform before uploading any data, because some AI tools store your inputs and use them for training. So if you have sensitive material, don't upload them to those platforms. There are enterprise or private options if you're working with sensitive data. There are enterprise tiers that assure their customers that they won't use your data beyond the sessions that you have, right? And again, when in doubt, just don't use AI for it. If you are unsure whether a data set is safe to upload or not, do not upload it. You can summarize, you can anonymize, and you can consult your editor or your legal team first. So now that we have that, I want to talk about another cool feature of AI that I've been using the past couple of years. AI is great at investigating structured data sets. I'm talking about spreadsheets and databases. The reason why it's great at investigating structured data sets is because it uses code to query those databases. So when you ask a question in plain English, AI would convert it into executable code like Python or SQL that queries the data set and returns the answer. You can even use it to visualize the results, to generate charts and graphs on the fly without any coding knowledge. What I found is that this is less prone to hallucinations because the AI retrieves the answers directly from the data that it retrieves for you rather than generating it from its model or its memory. So it is less likely to make things up. The errors usually would happen at the code level and not in the facts themselves. Most of the time, if there's an error in the code level, you can see it immediately because the data won't look right or the code just won't run at all. But it's always still good to verify because a flawed query can still return real numbers that answer the wrong question. So you always need to check the code that AI generated. If you're using ChatGPT or Claude, you can see there immediately when you run it against a spreadsheet, you can find the Python code that it executes to query that spreadsheet, and you can check that. You can also use another AI model to check the same data set. So a couple of years ago, I worked on this project where I uploaded the whole Philippine national budget into a Chat GPT, custom GPT, which means that using prompts, I can investigate my budget. Um, And so, for example, I can ask it, basketball is very big in the Philippines. Here I am asking it to show me all covered court projects under the Public Works Department here in the Philippines. And it will do a step-by-step breakdown, what columns it will search from the budget document, and it will run the query that will try to find the information that I asked for from this. So it would take a long time if you have a big database, but for smaller data sets, it works very fast. The budget document is unique. It's a beast of a document. There are more than 700,000 records. And so it takes a while to find all basketball court projects, or in this case, they're called covered courts in the budget for the administration. In the Philippines, it's worth more than 6 billion pesos, right? And then I was able to aggregate the data by the district office. And why I did that is so I can rank the aggregate by which district office it was that had the most basketball courts and the highest amount of spending for that. And now I'm asking it to graph the data with the amount in million peso on the x-axis and the number of projects on the y-axis. So it's executing Python code to try to graph this amount. Um, and this took me about 10 minutes to find, and I found that there is one very big outlier in the data set. And so I investigated the rest of the budget documents, and I just asked ChatGPT to tweak the graph itself to look nicer. Um, and I found that there is one outlier. A district office is somewhere in central Philippines, a small office, where they had more than 100 new basketball court projects for 2025, worth more than 1 billion pesos. And so this sounds anomalous immediately, and um, especially after I did a quick Google search, and I learned that this district office, there are only about 30 villages in this district office. So each village will be getting 3 or 4 new basketball courts in a single year. And on its face, this is very anomalous already. And what I tell journalists in the Philippines is this is where the job of the AI ends and where the job of the journalist begins, because now they can ask the people who designed this budget why there are so many basketball court projects in this district. They can visit those basketball courts to determine if they were really built, or were they ghost projects, or any other issues that they could find. Again, it took me 10 minutes to find this information in a large budget data set, which goes to show how easy it is once you have designed the tool, and you can use AI to search the information for you. I've also used AI to map all the public works projects in the Philippines, and categorize them by the type. You see that most of the works projects are road networks between 10 million and 100 million pesos. There was a big controversy last year over flood control systems in the Philippines, along with some big ticket items, because the Philippines is among the countries most hardest hit by climate change. And so when it began flooding in the Philippines, people began to question where their money was going. And this illustrates that, yes, there are so many flood control projects for the Public Works Department for 2025, but there are even more road network projects. Now, as a result of that outcry about corruption, possible corruption in flood control projects, the president of the Philippines addressed it directly, and he published a website that listed all the flood control projects over the past several years in that one website. And that website was very hard to navigate. If you are familiar with government websites, they don't make it easy to find the data. And so what I did was I used AI to create a script to download all the information in the website and put it in an Excel sheet. And I made that Excel sheet publicly available for everyone to do their reporting. So I used AI to help me develop that script. I vibe coded that scraper. And that resulted in media organizations in the Philippines doing local stories based on the data set that I downloaded. So this is a report from a local news organization about a small town in their province having the second most flood control projects in their region, even though it was a tiny town that didn't flood all that much, right? So the most expensive flood control projects were in towns that didn't flood that much, and that was quite anomalous already. Think tanks also use that data set and they use both AI and manual methods to connect those projects to particular representatives in Congress, and to try to connect the dots between um, anomalous projects and corrupt politicians. But what excited me about this particular data set was that people began to use AI to investigate it for themselves. So this is an article from one news outlet in the Philippines where they put out a guide to try to figure out how to investigate flood control projects using AI. Um, and so when I posted this data set, I just told everyone you can load this into ChatGPT and you can begin asking questions. And people began asking questions. What they would do is they would download the data set, load it up into ChatGPT, and they were able to find um, flood control data that was relevant to their local context. Some of them were quite mad about what they found because there was a lot of money being spent in their regions and they were not feeling the benefits of these projects. Aside from finding what you already know, I've found that AI is also great at finding patterns in structured data sets. It's gotten really good, especially the thinking models, at spotting trends, patterns, and anomalies in data. So AI can scan massive data sets and flag entries that look suspicious. You can use AI to form and test hypotheses about data sets. So AI can help you think through what they mean when you're doing investigation into large data sets. And then AI can also help you look and connect the dots across multiple data sets at once to find links and to surface connections between records that would otherwise take a long time to do. One of my projects last year was that we inspected the Philippines climate budget. Like I said, the Philippines is among the hardest hit countries in the world by climate change. And every year, the Philippine government publishes a data set detailing how much the government supposedly spent for climate change. And last year, they said they were spending 1.1 trillion pesos on climate change, which is more than 10% of the whole Philippine budget. Um, and so it was a big data set, and it was our first time investigating this data set. We didn't know exactly what to do. And so what we did is we just threw that climate expenditure data into an AI reasoning model, and we asked it to find insights and patterns from those data sets, right? And we put together two criteria for whether or not that insight would make it to our final report. The first is editorial and news judgment based. Is it interesting? Is it newsworthy? Is it headline worthy? Or is it an insight that was obvious already that it was no longer news? So the first criterion we had was, is it interesting? The second is obviously, is it accurate? Right? Once we find an interesting insight, we did another check into the data for its accuracy. We wouldn't publish anything unless we fact checked whether or not it's accurate. And so, even with just those two criteria, we were able to build a report. And what we found that most of the spending tagged by the government for climate change was related to public works, which had a total allocation of 1.031 trillion, almost 90% of all climate-related appropriations. That means that a lot of it is infrastructure projects, and most of which were not really related to climate change. They just wanted to pad the numbers to say that they were spending a lot of money on climate change. And another issue, 97.2% of the budget was spent for climate adaptation, and only 2.8% for mitigation measures. Now, climate experts would tell you that, of course, adaptation should take up a larger chunk of the budget. But I don't know about the ratio of 92% versus less than 3% for mitigation. And then we found also that less than 1% of the total budget for climate expenditure in the Philippines went to the Environment Department. It found further insights for us, like two-thirds of the mitigation budget is for the transport sector, and only four entities accounted for 98% of the climate budget, which is transport, agriculture, government corporations, and environment. And we've also found that there is no significant investment by the government in energy projects which would help mitigate climate change in the country and greenhouse gas emissions in the country for the foreseeable future, which meant that the government was depending on private funds or private corporations to drive the transition into clean energy. Now, the reason why I discussed this particular project is because of how I wanted to demonstrate how we built an evaluation criteria for using AI to find information for our projects. And what I found is building an evaluation criteria is critical if you want to use AI in your workflows, because an evaluation criteria would tell you whether or not it's working or if it's not working for your projects. Like, for example, one of your criterion could be accuracy. So you're checking for hallucinations or factual errors. How do you know it passed? Of course, you want to verify it against the source. So if you don't have a good source, then you can fact check for accuracy and you can't use that AI system, right? And so it gives you an idea of how to build an AI system that works for your context. Another criterion could be consistency with instructions. whether or not it did exactly what you asked. And then you can specify things like output format, the length, and the tone. And if it doesn't do that, then you'll know whether or not it followed your instruction. Another criterion could be contextual awareness, like bias, the framing, right? Is it cognizant of the culture that you're working with, or does it get those things wrong, right? And so, how do you know that that the AI output is good? Is whether or not you, as a local editor, would approve something like that. Um, and then I wanted to talk about overfitting. This is a concept of the AI just following your prompts very, very closely. And so you don't find the data you're looking for. It just gives you what your what you asked for in the prompt. And so if you're using it for data analysis, it's not going to surface something yet that you didn't expect. Now, these are just example criterions. So you need to build your own criteria for the workflow that you are going to be doing. Just some tips for improving your output evaluation. The biggest one is to use your evaluation checklist in real newsroom work, right? After you get feedback in the work on your checklist, you need to update and test your prompts as necessary. If you're working with a team, it's always great to bring examples of good and bad outputs to your team so that you can discuss and to figure out how to get rid of the bad outputs and uh, to make sure that good outputs are consistent, right? And once you have your evaluation criteria, it's not going to be a static document. It's going to be a living document as you learn what matters to your customers, whether it's internal, which are editorial customers, or to audiences, right? Another tip, keep a note of prompts that give the best results. And you can even use AI to iterate and improve on your evaluation criteria. AI can also be quite helpful in cleaning data sets. Again, because it actually generates the code to clean data sets. Um, and this is a bane for a lot of us in this call, having to manually clean data sets, making sure it's in the format that can be readable by the machine. It can help you prepare data for analysis. It can help you restructure, reformat, and reorganize a messy document into something that's ready for investigation. It's also helpful for auditing your data. So before you start your investigation, if it's a public data set, I would advise you to upload it to a chatbot first and get an idea of what what is in the data before even starting your audit or your investigations, right? It can also help you remove the noise because raw data can sometimes be full of duplicates or stray characters or entries or columns that don't belong or rows that are headings. AI can help strip this for you without you having to write a single line of code. So here's an example. This is something that we encounter. We go through a PDF and we find a table, and it's very hard to turn that table into a spreadsheet. So here's an example of me just taking a screenshot of that page, and I'm asking Claude to give me a table that contains the data for that file in a CSV format, right? So it is able to read that image that I posted, put the data into a CSV format that now I can use for programmatic um, purposes, and I can immediately check whether or not the data is correct. But now I have it in an Excel sheet or a CSV instead of a PDF or in an image. So here's something that I always deal with in my work. This is a report from the Philippine Statistics Agency. This is a good data set, but look at the format. It's formatted for print. And so this is hard to do investigations against because you're going to have to do it manually. And so for this example, I used ChatGPT uh, to ask it to turn this spreadsheet into a machine readable CSV. And so it will read the spreadsheet itself. It will try to convert it and then try to find the libraries in Python that it would need to do it. On the right, you can look at the code that it executes to query that data set so you can audit that process, right? And it's doing some thinking about how it's going to render that into a machine readable CSV. Now, it's very important for you to check. Now, I was able to save it. Now, it's very important for you to check. Again, the output evaluation is very important because here are a couple of examples. I ran this query twice and it gave me different formatting. Here is this is accurate, but it is not complete, right? So it gave me the spreadsheet in a machine readable format, but a quick look shows me that there are some things that it missed, like the footnotes, for example, or some of the headings. So just asking it to be more detailed, asking it for more details in my prompt, gave me this spreadsheet that is machine readable, that shows the table, the geography, the category, all the way to the footnotes for all the different entries in that data set. So some things to consider when cleaning data with AI. Always check the clean data. After AI has reorganized or reformatted your data set, you're gonna have to verify that nothing was dropped or merged incorrectly or changed in ways you didn't intend, right? A clean looking spreadsheet may still have errors. So what you can do to check this is you can do um, pilot executions where you can check whether it works for a small part of the data, and then after that ask AI to process the rest of the data for you, right? Another thing to consider is that AI will fill the gaps if you let it. When data is missing, AI may substitute plausible looking values rather than flag the absence, right? Always confirm, do spot checks to confirm that what you're seeing came from the data and not from AI guessing. And so it's helpful to set an AI evaluation criteria. So before you ask AI to clean your data, decide what clean looks like, decide what done looks like. Without a clear standard to check against, you don't know whether the output is actually usable. What I found in my experience over the past 2 years is that AI is getting better at cleaning data sets. In the past, it couldn't deal with those spreadsheets that are meant for print, and now it's able to do that easily. And I think it's just going to get better. But always check the clean data. What I found that at this point, checking the clean data um, is still a much easier task than doing it manually. So using AI is worth it just for the fact that you save a lot of time when it comes to cleaning the data. And always check against your output evaluation criteria. AI has really gotten so much better now with coding agents. I'm talking about tools like Codex and Claude Code. So it's a new kind of AI tool because you download it into your desktop and it's going to have access to your files. It's going to have access to the web. It's going to have access to other tools, and you can use them. And you can it can use those tools to carry out tasks on your behalf. So it's been quite a game changer for the software development industry. There are a lot of programmers who claim they don't write code anymore. They just use coding agents to do the work for them. But I found that it's also excellent for doing data journalism, right? And the way it works is it is able to write, to run, and to debug their own code. Remember, when dealing with data and spreadsheets, AI would write code that it would use to query your data sets. So again, you can do natural language questions. You describe what you want, and the coding agents figures out how to get there with the code. And then it's able to adjust when something doesn't work out, right? So it's been good for me for end-to-end data work. I can give a coding agent a messy spreadsheet and a goal, and it's able to clean the data, run an analysis, and produce charts, and it can work through the whole pipeline. So here's an example. You can download from the Meta Ad Library the ad report for your country for political or social issues related advertising on the platform. So in this case, I downloaded the last 90 days report for the Philippines. And this is what it looks like. It's fine. It's not a very comprehensive report. It just shows the page ID, the name of the page, the disclaimer, which should include the entity that paid for that ad, along with the amount spent and the number of ads in the library for that time period. So you can download this for your own country, and it's quite helpful when you're doing election related coverage and you want to take a look at who is spending a lot on the Facebook or the Meta platforms. So using a coding agent, I could just take that spreadsheet and I could tell Codex to analyze that spreadsheet for outliers and other interesting observations. Afterwards, I'm asking it to build me a dashboard containing the findings, right? And it's going to execute code saying that it will inspect the structure of the project and also the spreadsheet itself. It's going to read what is in the spreadsheet to try to figure out the shape of the data, right? It's going to automatically make decisions like values like that Meta puts, like less than 100. So it's treating that as 100 PHP. So you can read that and you can flag that. Should it have been treated as 100 pesos or should it be zero? So you can tell the AI later on that if that needs adjusting. But here in this interface, you can see what it is it up to, and it's going to give an initial report. In its initial report, it found a very skewed data sets, more than almost 3,000 rows, about 32.6 million pesos in total, Um, but the median row is only 257 pesos. And so the top 25 rows account for roughly half of all spending. So it's telling me that it's going to build the dashboard around that concentration, and it's going to build that dashboard about all the other outliers it found, like the ad count slash spend mismatch, the disclaimer aggregation, and the highest spend per ad outlier. This is taking about, maybe in real time, maybe about less than 10 minutes. I'm not even doing any typing at this point. It just generates the code as an HTML file, and it will give me a summary of what it found. Found that total spend is about 32.6 million pesos. He told me that already. It found that one page called Pilipinas Today accounted for more than a quarter of all spending. Another entity, WFPH, is the largest disclaimer aggregate, and rows without a disclaimer are 7.70% of rows, but only 9.8% of spend. It also identified particular politicians in the Philippines as the highest spend per ad outliers, such as Senator Win Gatchalian. Bam Aquino is another senator in the Philippines, and Conrado Estrella III is a department secretary or a minister in the Philippines. And this is the dashboard that it created in less than 10 minutes. So I'm able to find the spend. There's a graph for the spend versus number of ads. I can find the outliers, the top spenders. That's the most obvious thing, but also the pages with the most ads. I can also look at the highest spend per ad, mostly politicians in the Philippines, along with regional pages. Uh, Pages that have a lot of ads but spend very little, right? So here the spend per ad is about 100 pesos. And the opposite, those pages that only had a single ad but had a very high spend. And so with the coding agent, it was able to find me all this information in less than 10 minutes. Uh, this is not something that I would publish yet, but it's a good way to start my investigation. And this is already something deeper than the usual story when I see reports about the Meta ad library spending. They just write reports about the top spender. You can try this already immediately if you have a $20 a month subscription to Codex or to Claude. You can immediately experiment with these tools. Um, my most recent project was a vibe coding project where I took a health and demographic survey from the Philippines, and I spent a week to create a visually complex dashboard that also included AI generated insights from that big data set, that important data set. The reason why I worked on this was that when it was released, most of the stories around the release of that data set of this survey focused on only one thing, which was the fertility rate in the Philippines falling below replacement level. But there were so many interesting data points in the data set that I thought um, no one ever read. And so I thought that a dashboard to visualize all the information would be a great way to entice not just journalists but policymakers, researchers to take a deeper look at the data set and perhaps even connect the dots on some data. So here is the dashboard. This shows the teenage pregnancy, for example, across the different regions from the Philippines. I can take a look at contraception rates among all women in different regions in the Philippines, and even modern contraception among married and sexually active women in the Philippines. I can take a look at childhood mortality, and which shows me which region has the highest childhood mortality, attitudes toward child discipline, and even intimate partner violence, which tells such a unique story about which regions. Um, and for this project, I also generated text insights from the data that were generated using AI, along with charts that visualized the data. Now, I want to talk about the maps because what I found interesting is that uh, whenever I would show colleagues the maps or the data or even the insights, their first question to me would be, uh, why? Like I would show them uh, the map that shows intimate partner violence, and it shows clearly which region that happened. And their question to me would be, why? And I would tell them, well, the data doesn't explain the why, right? The AI helped us visualize the data, but the why is a question for the journalists to answer. Um, and I think this kind of tool, using AI for investigating data sets, allows us to focus on the why, right? Why is intimate partner violence so big so high in certain regions of the Philippines? Why is uh, early childhood mortality so high in a particular region in the Philippines? That's not in the data set. AI cannot answer that for you. It's going to take your research, your investigation, um, to be able to answer those questions. Um, and I think this illustrates the real value of tools like this, is that it allows the journalists, the investigators to focus on questions that AI couldn't answer based on what is in the data. The data becomes the investigation into the data becomes the easy part. The hard part is the processes before and after the AI, right? Are you able to find data that would be easy for you to investigate using AI? Is that data verified? Is that data clean? Are you able to get that from the government? Do you need to write freedom of information requests to be able to find that data? And the second is, what do you do after you find the AI generated insights or the maps or the visualizations that AI help you investigate the data with? Now you can figure out what is the right format to tell these stories. Is it a long form investigation? Is it a documentary? Is it going to be a podcast series? Who do you talk to about these things? What are policymakers intending to do about these problems that you are able to find in the data? And so the data becomes the easy part because AI would help you with the investigations. Later on, after you participate in this, you can check out my the whole story I wrote about how I developed this dashboard. And I think one of the most interesting parts of this project for me was I used AI to generate text insights from the data. Uh, what I found is that it's very valuable because sometimes, even if you are already able to visualize with maps or with charts, um, having a succinct text narrative works best to explain complex data sets. Um, and so the AI, I wasn't going to write these were 28 indicators and even more different columns. I wasn't going to write all that copy. It I mean, there was no desire on my part to just dig into the data and write all that up. And so I had AI write it, and I created an output evaluation framework. So I did two workflows to check the insights. The first was a fact checking workflow where I would run an agent to check the output of the AI line by line, block by block, and it would query the data to figure out if the block supported what is in the data. And I would have it write out a report for me, uh which which would grade each block, whether it's supported, it's mostly supported, it's partly supported by the data, or if it's completely unsupported by the data. Um, and it worked well for me as a fact checker. This was a solo project. I had to read all of it. And it took me to the actual data point that would support that data set. And I instructed it to provide suggestions also to make the text more in line with what the data was saying. The second evaluation criteria that I put in was I wanted it to sound more human. And so I created a rewriting workflow that would uh, take what was so robotic or analyst speak in the insights for the dashboard, and it would rewrite that into a more human sounding narrative. And so it would also give me a reason for why it would do that edits, and it would give me side by side explanations for what it suggested to be edited in the insights. And so that also made my job easier for me. And at the end of the process, I would run the fact checker workflow again to check whether or not the rewrites did not break the fact checking. And so with coding agents, it became easy for me to do. As long as the data is organized, I could do fact checking agents that could help me with the work. Um, just to end our my presentation, I wanted to give some parting shots. I think we saw. I hope you saw some pretty cool things in our presentation today. The temptation would be to, to find a shiny new toy to play with it. But I think the best projects with AI always start with the journalism problem and not the AI tool. So figure out what problem you're trying to solve in the newsroom before starting to think about what AI tool you're going to use. Also, as I hope you've seen throughout my presentation, your journalism skills are going to be invaluable in designing AI tools and workflows. That was true for me from the very first AI project that I built, that audit assistant. And it's true for everything that I'm still building today, even with these agentic AIs. When I create a project, when I create a goal, my editorial skills are very useful there. When I create evaluation criteria, those evaluation criteria are, for the most part, the editorial criteria I would also have. Um, in fact, in the article that I wrote about this health dashboard, I compared the nature of working with the coding agent to not be dissimilar from my work before, when I was an editor and I was leading data projects, where I would have so many editorial and design decisions. That was me making it as a journalist, and not me depending on AI to make those decisions for me. Um, ag- and the next thing I want to highlight is that good AI systems are built through testing and iteration. It's very rare that you can find a one-shot solution using AI. Um, you're going to have to keep checking, to keep evaluating whether the output is good. Chances are the first output is not going to be good enough for you, um, especially when you are building out a system and not just a one-time thing. And speaking of systems, I think the best AI systems amplify human expertise. And by this, I mean your expertise as journalists in the newsroom. Um, it can be democratizing. If you have an expert in data journalism, their expertise can be transferred over to the rest of your newsroom, so that they don't have to have all that experience to be able to produce meaningful work using AI for their investigations. And with that, I ended my presentation early. And so I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat. Um, Maybe Andrea, we can start with the questions now.
Thank you so much, J Mark, and thanks everyone for all of the questions. I'm gonna ask it in different batches. So, J Mark, I'm gonna ask you four questions, and then once you answer, if we have time, I'll ask another four.
All
So
right.
the first one is, can J Mark recommend prompt engineering courses for beginners or for journalists? The second one,
Yes. Sorry.
I'll
Go
ask
ahead.
four and then you can answer.
Uh,
The second one is, which are the best free LLMs? And if you have any recommendations of those which do not use our input for learning. So maybe they are paid, right? So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Then the third one, when you use AI tools to help discover potential investigative stories or patterns, how do you balance that sweet spot where AI is useful without letting it dominate your own critical thinking and instincts as a reporter? So that's the third one. I'm going to go for a fourth one, which is, how do you make sure the hypothesis created with the help of AI is not hallucinations led, fully or partially, and therefore pursuing wrong investigative paths? So the first four questions are there, J Mark. Thank you.
all right. First, the prompt engineering courses for beginners. Google has one on Coursera that is pretty good for beginners. It takes you through the basics of understanding not just prompt engineering, but how LLMs work, and it's free. So I recommend that. But the best prompt engineering really is to play around with these tools for journalism work, for your own use cases. Obviously, you need to be careful about the data you provide, but playing around with a task and figuring out whether the output is good or not, evaluating that, and then becoming an expert in using that for that particular task. That's the best way to learn. The second question about the best LLMs, I think the leading edge models, Gemini, Claude, and ChatGPT, are about the same in terms of ability right now. So my recommendation is to use whatever is paid for already by your company. Um, because they're about all about the same. Um, what's the sweet spot for using AI tools for pattern recognition? Um, I think the sweet spot is that uh, you always have to remember that you're the boss. You're in control. You don't need to use anything that AI gives you just because AI gave you that. Whenever you use it for any task, for headline writing or brainstorming, or even for finding patterns in data, uh, you're always the editor. You always verify. You always check whether it's newsworthy. You always check if it's accurate. Um, and so the sweet spot is just using it as a tool to help you find insights in the data. Um, and then how would you know if it gives you good results? Well, that's where your evaluation criteria would come in. Um, and also, like, if you ask it to find insight and if it's not finding you good insights, then that's not the sweet spot. So you just push it again and you iterate, and maybe there's something off with your prompt. Um, but always remember that you are the one in charge and AI is not the one in charge of you. Um, and that goes into the fourth question too about, how do you know if a hypothesis is not part of the hallucination? That's a good thing, because the hypothesis is just that, a hypothesis that you can test against the evidence, right? And so if it's hallucinated, then that hypothesis would fall apart when you uh, test it against the real data. What AI allows you to do is to be able to iterate quickly because you don't have to code anymore. You don't have to have the expertise of a data scientist. You can test as many hypotheses as you can. The way to use AI for coming up with hypotheses is you just use it as a brainstorming partner to come up with hypotheses for you. But again, you're always the boss. You're always in charge. You always check whether or not the hypothesis falls apart when um, it is checked against the data. At the end of it, you're the one whose byline is going to appear on the project. And as I always tell folks in the Philippines when I do workshops, if there's an error in the work, they're not going to blame AI. They're going to blame you.
Exactly. Thank you. I'm gonna read a second batch of questions. So there are a lot of questions on visual evidence. How good are AI tools like ChatGPT on geolocating images, identifying insignias, or transcribing audio from videos? Also, what AI tools do you find most useful for data analysis and visualization? So, a lot of questions on tools that you can recommend, both paid and unpaid. And another question that's different from this one is AI is developing rapidly. What could journalists see AI to do for us this time next year? I don't know if you have any thoughts of what capabilities would you like to see.
Okay. First, the visual analysis. So AI is solid for in computer vision. It's solid for describing what is in the picture. So if you put a picture of a cat, it's going to be able to identify that's a picture of a cat. If you have a picture of a street, it's going to identify elements in the street. Where things go wrong is if you ask it to try to guess where, for example, that location is. Because then it's going to fill in the gaps. It doesn't have enough context unless you give it enough context. So it's going to be good if you're classifying images, for example, satellite images or street images or drone images, to see patterns in those images, right? And to identify what is in that image, but it's not quite good enough to do open source intelligence where you do geolocation. Um, and I'm sorry, I failed to put it in the site. I had a very good example for this. Um, I had a picture where I took a picture of a statue of the icon of the University of the Philippines. I asked ChatGPT to identify where the photo was taken. It guessed that it was at the University of the Philippines campus near my home in Quezon City in Metro Manila, but in fact it was taken at another campus. And so it was able to identify that the statue was an icon of the university, but when I asked it to guess where it was taken, it was wrong because most of the photos of that statue were in the university here near me and not in the other campus. And so that is part of the work that you're going to have to do when you're designing AI systems. I talked about figuring out what AI is good at and what you're good at. And in this case, AI is good at identifying what's in the picture, but not guessing where other contexts that are not in the picture. Um, for tools, uh, Claude, ChatGPT, and Gemini are good for data analysis. You can try Gemini and Notebook LM for investigating or summarizing video. So you can even I earlier I demonstrated Notebook LM for PDF files, but you can add YouTube videos into your sources and you can chat with YouTube videos. And it's gonna give you an okay summary. You can ask where which part of the video the speaker said something like this. So it's good for investigating that. Um, AI tool for best accurate transcription for audio recordings. There's there's an a tool from OpenAI called Whisper, which you can run on your systems or your computers, and they that's the best tool right now. Uh, it doesn't support all languages in the world. There are many regional languages in the Philippines, for example, that it doesn't support. Um, you can check different providers like Gemini, for example, supports a regional language here in the Philippines that isn't supported by OpenAI. So the best tool is actually the one that supports the language and the audio that works for you. And the second question about AI developing rapidly, um, it is impressive how rapid the tools have been. And especially with coding agents, I think it really allows you to build a lot. Um, and I'm just trying to adjust as fast as I can. But the interesting thing is to start this presentation, I talked about figuring out what's good, what AI is good at and what you're good at. And then a couple of months ago, the New York Times had a story about how they were using AI for investigating the Epstein files. And Dylan Friedman, who's an engineer for their AI investigations team, was talking about how they had to figure out what AI is good at and what editors are good at in doing those investigations. So I think that framework uh, hasn't changed in the past 3 years, despite so many, now 4 years now, despite so many advances in AI. And I suspect that that framework would be useful um, in the years to come, even as these AI systems get better. We're always having to evaluate what they're good at and which part of our work they can help us with.
Excellent. And then we have one last batch of questions. J Mark, everyone is so interested in your work there. It was so hard to choose, but I'm gonna do this final three. The first one is, do you have any insights on DuckDuckGo AI or Lumo AI, which are presented as not having any data retention information? The second one is verifying AI output can help prevent false positives like hallucinations. Can you recommend any strategies to prevent false negatives in which the AI misses something that a human would have noticed? And then the
Mhm.
third question to end, what excites you the most about the future of investigative journalism with the use of AI? And any final words of advice to our audience?
Right. So first, the platforms that say that they won't retain your data. I think I'm very practical when it comes to AI use. If it works for you, then go ahead, use it. So it's good that there are platforms that we have the option of using. The next question would be, does it work? Right? Because if it doesn't work, then it's no good for what you want to do. So I'd love to hear if you're going to test it. I'd love to hear feedback from you, whoever it is who wrote that question. I'd love to hear feedback about whether or not those particular platforms would work for you. Um, I recommend Notebook LM a lot because of their terms of service where they say they won't use your information to train their models and that your data remains private. That might not be good enough for all our use cases, but it's notable that many news organizations, including the New York Times, that's one of the tools that are okay for them for journalists to use. Um, the second question was about false negatives. Um, I think my experience has been doing um auditing, especially when I'm doing investigations against big data sets. For example, right now I'm working with a Rappler, a news organization founded by Nobel laureate Maria Ressa in the Philippines, where we're investigating audit reports again, but the data set we're investigating is 16,000 reports. And so at each step of that investigation, we're doing a statistical sampling of the audit reports. And we're doing both an AI fact check and a manual fact check to figure out if that step worked correctly. And so I think both for false positives and false negatives, there needs to be a system where there is verification in the loop, whether it's just human in the loop verification or if it's a combination of AI and human verification. And then finally, what excites me most, I think, is the democratic potential of these technologies. Um, some of the things you could do with AI used to be the province of data scientists, for which you had to have a master's degree or a programming degree to be able to execute. And now you can do complex clustering analysis and you can generate all sorts of information with just a bit of reading up on the topic, a bit of knowledge to be able to apply it in your reporting work. You saw how fast the coding agent built me a dashboard for Facebook ads data. And Facebook ads data is something that we should be investigating around the world. And if we could, start the leads part, if we don't have to get into the weeds of the data and just find the insights immediately, I think that would improve our reporting substantially. And so I talked about it earlier. Now we can focus more on the why of the reasons for why this data is what it is, right? And we can tell those stories, we can give faces to those stories beyond what is in the data. That is the most exciting part for me.
Thank you so much, J Mark, for your time, for those inspiring insights and tools. From what I read in the chat box and the Q&A box, I mean, you really inspired our audience. So, yeah, we hope to see you soon among us. For those who joined late and who asked the question, we'll send you a follow-up email with the links J Mark shared and also with the link to the recording of this session. A big thank you to Amel, who you didn't see, Amel Rani from our team from the Resource Center, but who was behind the scenes to make this possible and produce the webinar and this workshop. Thank you very much, Andrea, for moderating the questions with so much talent and expertise. Tomorrow, Andrea is organizing a very similar workshop with a Spanish-speaking trainer. So those among you who are interested, you can still register. And thank you everyone for joining. Thank you again, J Mark. This was fantastic, and see you very soon at the next GIGN workshop. Bye bye, everybody.